So rest easy, ladies and gentlemen. A special counsel is supposedly looking into Joe Biden. They haven't produced anything that we know of, so the Daily Mail has to fill the gap. They just found proof that Biden's brother Jimmy, Fast Jimmy Biden, was hired by a construction company to negotiate with the Saudi government while Joe Biden was vice president, because he's an expert on Middle East construction. We're also learning that the University of Delaware, like the University of Pennsylvania, made a ton of money from, can you guess? Oh yes, China, after Joe Biden opened a fake institute there. The dumbest man in politics as an academic institute. A source tells Fox News that the FBI recently searched the University of Delaware twice for classified documents belonging to Biden. The FBI is still assessing whether there were any classified documents there. Peter Schweizer is probably the most talented digger into information like this in the United States. He's president of the Government Accountability Institute, and we're really happy to have him join us tonight. Peter, thank you for coming on. What do you make of this? What does it mean?
It's very important. I mean, look, Tucker, if you look at the nexus of these financial ties that the Bidens have with China, you have to go back to the Chinese state, and you also have to go back to Chinese intelligence. Let's keep in mind, Hunter Biden got 3 big deals in China. Some of that money he shared with James Biden. You know, potentially it went to other family members. If you look at all 3 of the businessmen that made those deals happen, those ties are there. The first one was a guy named Che Feng. He helped set up Hunter Biden on that BHR private equity deal that netted Hunter perhaps $20 million based on estimates. When he set Hunter Biden up with that deal, Che Feng was partners with a gentleman named Ma Jian, who was the vice minister for state security in China, with responsible for foreign recruitment. That's from Hong Kong corporate records. The second deal that was set up for Hunter Biden was a guy named Henry Zhao. Henry Zhao transferred $5 million into one of Hunter Biden's accounts. At the time he did that, Henry Zhao was business partners with the daughter of the former Minister of State Security, who ran the entire spy apparatus of China. If you look at Chairman Yi, the CEFC, the energy company, his previous job was working for Chinese military intelligence. So when you're talking about money coming from China to the Bidens, when you're talking about concerns about classified records, when you're concerned about what did the Bidens actually do in return for that money, these are all very serious, legitimate questions that I don't have much confidence at all that the Department of Justice is going to look into.
It just seems so obvious. I mean, these dots really do connect. And again, I have confidence in no one more than you in getting to the bottom of complex money-related stories. But is there any doubt that what looks like was going on was actually going on?
Yeah, I mean, Tucker, you know, you and I both went through the Cold War, at least the 1980s. Imagine if Ronald Reagan's family or Jimmy Carter's family took, you know, tens of millions of dollars from Russian businessmen linked to the KGB. Would there be any question at all that this requires serious investigation? Instead, what we're getting from a lot of people is, well, you can't prove that a crime was being committed. It's an absurd standard that needs to be looked at.
Now, this information has been out for several weeks. It's been in the hands of a number of different news organizations. The reason you're hearing a lot of this for the first time tonight on this show is because they have resolutely ignored it and tried to suppress the story. Joe Biden has rarely been asked about it, though there is an enormous amount of detail and documentation that no one has refuted because it's real. This topic did come up because the president pushed it at last week's presidential debate. And what was notable was that Joe Biden didn't deny any specifics about his connections to the Chinese Communist Party, his family doing business there, he himself participating in that business. Instead, Biden dismissed the entire story out of hand and suggested that Tony Bobulinski, who is a veteran, a former naval officer, was part of a Russian disinformation campaign aimed at this country. His evidence for that? Well, there wasn't any. Instead, he cited a letter from, quote, 50 former national intelligence folks, almost all of them partisans, every one of them a liar. None of them had directly assessed the information. Not one of them called Tony Bobulinski. They knew nothing. Joe Biden said that on stage. And so when we spoke to Tony Bobulinski, we asked him his reaction to that. And here's what he said. Tell me about the conversation that you had with Joe Biden. What did he say to you?
You mean the morning after he spoke?
That's right.
There was 10 people running around, getting him something to drink, and we were backstage in a cramped space, and he asked me to walk with him out to the car, and he just asked, how I did and what I thought of his speech, and I thought he did a great job in the speech, and obviously cancer is a very serious thing that we should all be working together to solve. I just lost a sister-in-law within the last 2 weeks, sadly, to cancer. And then he just sort of asked me to keep an eye on his son and his brother. Yeah.
What do you think he meant by that?
I think he was conscious of things, and I can't speak for him. Maybe
Right.
I would love for him to go on record. As I referenced earlier, I'm only sitting here because they have not only have they not gone on record, they've denied it, and they've tarred my family name and a long history of serving this country, and have other congressmen now talking about Russian disinformation.
This whole smear on Joe Biden comes from the Kremlin.
I held a top secret clearance from the NSA and the DOE. I served this country for 4 years in one of the most elite environments in the world, Naval Nuclear Power Training Command. And to have a congressman out there speaking about Russian disinformation, or Joe Biden at a public debate referencing Russian disinformation, when he knows he sat face to face with me, that I traveled around the world with his son and his brother, to say that and associate that with my name is absolutely disgusting to me.
Did you complain about that? I mean, to suggest that you were committing treason or a part of a foreign attack on our democracy, which is how they characterized it. I mean, that's such a serious and I think unfair charge. Did you bring this up with them?
Well, in basic form, you're exactly right. They are publicly accusing me of treason right now, treating me like I'm insignificant, or the 50 years of history that my family served this country is insignificant. And that's why I'm sitting here having this. I assure you, this is the absolute last place I want to be right now, and the last thing I want to be doing right now. But I feel like I have a patriotic duty to this country and every American citizen to go on record and to find the facts for them and let them do their own work. Let them decide how they view those facts or not. But for the Biden family to deny these facts, and then not only deny them, they could have just said no comment, but they didn't say no comment. They then brought in Russian disinformation and basically associated my name with that, which is absolutely disgusting to me. And I had to go on the record. Last weekend, I was in Virginia. Sadly, my sister-in-law passed away at around, I think, 6:38 Saturday morning. That's the wife of my brother, who spent 28 years serving this country as a naval flight officer and just retired. So you can imagine me dealing with that and the tragedy of that. When I saw Adam Schiff go on record talking about Russian disinformation after this email had been posted online by the New York Post, and remember, that email was to me from James Gillier, right? It wasn't, I wasn't blind carboned or CC'd on that. It was to me stating that I was going to be the CEO of this enterprise. I was at the end of my rope. And so I called Rob Walker, and I told him that if that statement isn't retracted by Congressman Schiff by midnight on Sunday, that I was going on record and I was disclosing all the facts to the American government, to the American citizen, and the world. I was hoping the Bidens would do the right thing, or Schiff would retract his statement, but I could not allow another minute, another hour, or a day for my family's name to be associated or muddied up around Russian disinformation. So even as I sit here today, I would ask the Biden family to come on record and stop using my name or associating it with Russian disinformation. It's absolutely disgusting.
So this is Rob Walker, the representative of the Biden family. I believe his wife worked for the Biden family, apparently. So you said this to him. I won't go public. I just want them to retract the accusation that I'm an instrument of Russian disinformation. What did he say?
That's correct. Rob is under a tremendous amount of stress.
Right.
Obviously, his wife and a child. And he said, listen, let me make some calls. Let me call George, who's Hunter Biden's lawyer, and see what I can do. But he sort of presented it as if that's going to be impossible for me to get done. And, I'm not naive. I know that's not impossible to do. That's a single phone call from Joe Biden to Adam Schiff saying, basically, go on record and retract your statement. You got over your skis. And when I was up late that night, And when the statement wasn't retracted, come Monday morning, I was ready to go on record. And how that record was, I was willing to go in front of any senator, any congressman, the Department of Justice, the FBI, or sit here with you, Tucker, and basically provide the facts to the American people and let them make their decision. This isn't a political focus of mine. People were accusing my family of treason after I served this country and defended this country.
So the reason you wound up here in this interview, and I just want to affirm for our audience, I don't think you had any desire to do this interview.
Absolutely no desire.
Is because nobody else told your story. So were you surprised, given the trove of documents you have, given the credibility that I think is apparent that you have, that no other news organization took the time to unpack this story?
Surprised is probably an understatement of the year. Shocked, because it would be different if this was my word against Jim Biden, Hunter Biden, and Joe Biden.
Right.
That would be a very slippery slope, not something I would take the personal and family risk on it. But I've provided more documents and facts that validate times, meetings, who participated. That email to me on May 13th was generated by somebody else sent to me. It wasn't me generating. These text messages that I've provided are Hunter Biden in the first person, Jim Biden in the first person, James Gilliar in the first person, Rob Walker in the first person. It's not me generating the text messages. It's them speaking. So you can interview them. The FBI can interview them. Our government can interview them. But I was shocked that not only the media is not only discussing this, they're going to the other extreme. They're dismissing it as Russian disinformation. This country has heard enough about Russia. We went through 3 years of every day, Russia, Russia, Russia. It's just absurd. The Cold War is over.
And they're saying it about your family.
Yes.
The Biden family knew that you're going public with this. And you spoke to Rob Walker about it. Again, the self-described Biden family representative, and Biden family, meaning Joe Biden as well. What was his response when you let him know that you were going public with this?
Trying to coach me, trying to sort of say, hey, we don't want to do that. We don't want, press trucks out in front of our house. I'm going to have to move. I could lose my job. And all that, I'm not trying to cause any harm to anyone in this situation,
right,
let alone Rob Walker and his family, James Gilliar and his family. But basically, Rob's position was, if you go on record with all these facts, you'll bury all of us.
If he doesn't come out on record, I am providing the facts.
Tony, you're just going to just bury all of us, man.
What was your response to that?
I was focused on pushing these guys to do the right thing, to demonstrate an ounce of integrity in front of the American people. They all know the facts. I live the facts. And luckily for the American people, all the facts are extremely well documented. I'm irrelevant in this discussion, so I can write off, but the American people can read these texts, listen to the recording that you just played, read the legal documents that were executed in Delaware, and they can form their own conclusion. They don't need me to form the conclusion for them.
Give us a sense of your contacts with Hunter Biden. A lot of this is complex. There's a lot that we're not, this is television, so we're not putting, everything that we have on the screen,
Right,
because we can't. But for those who might suspect that you didn't really have a lot of contact with Hunter Biden, give us a sense of some of the places where you had conversations with him, and over what time frame.
So obviously, as we already discussed, throughout 2015 and 2016, while Joe was still the sitting vice president of the United States, these guys had been doing extensive work around the world in places like Oman, Luxembourg, Romania, that I was being made aware of, but I obviously hadn't come off the bench and agreed to be part of this.
I'm sorry, I've got to interrupt you there. Oman, Luxembourg, Romania.
Correct.
So they don't speak any of these languages. Neither one of these guys has any record of success in business. Neither one has a background in international business. Why would they be doing business in Oman, Luxembourg, and Romania?
Because they have relationships and they have the Biden name, that they're able to set up meetings and get people to jump through hoops in an interest to garner favor with the sitting vice president, Joe Biden.
So that So it sounds like Gillier is a legitimate business guy, someone who's
Yes.
fluent in the language of international
James
business.
Gillier, served his country. He's British.
Yes.
He's traveled around the world for decades. He's a very low-profile
Right.
individual, but he's sharp and he's as legitimate as they come.
It sounds it. But Hunter Biden and Jim Biden have a well-documented, decades-long record of business disasters. Did you get any sense that either one of these guys was qualified to be conducting this kind of business?
The only qualification they had was the Biden name.
But they seem to have parlayed that into quite a few deals in quite a few countries. And I interrupted you, so continue with where they were doing these deals.
Yeah, so you had asked, the extent of my communication with Hunter Biden. So when I decided to come off the bench and entertain being the CEO of Sinohawk Holdings, obviously I was brought up to speed on the work that they had been doing in Oman, Luxembourg, France, Romania, Kazakhstan, and stuff like that, because that was all going to be integrated into Sinohawk Holdings. And so you asked to the extent that I spent time with Hunter Biden. I personally was in Bucharest, Romania, with Hunter Biden, Jim Biden, James Gillier, Rob Walker. I was in Monaco for the annual Grand Prix there. I was supposed to sit with Hunter Biden. I met him. I met on the patio of his hotel, and I sat there and waited for 2 hours. And you can imagine how angry and I was frustrated after sitting there for 2 hours waiting for him without a text, a phone call to let me know I can't make it or I'm tied up. And in a text that I think you guys are aware of and saw, the next day, he aggressively comes back at me that he couldn't attend the meeting that he himself set up. I stepped away from family and friends on the yacht that I was on with my friends to go sit with him for a couple hours. And he's effectively screaming into the phone that he could not pick up the phone and text me because he was with the Ukrainians and Mykola, the founder of Burisma, and that he was fighting for the only income he has on the Kazakhstan deal that apparently he negotiated. Now, I had no exposure to the Kazakhstan deal. I'm not aware of any of the particulars of the Kazakhstan deal. I just know for a fact there is a Kazakhstan deal because Hunter Biden in first person told me there was in the text that I think you guys have and you will show to the American people. It's not my job to determine what that deal is. I'll leave that up to the FBI or the Senate and the Congress to figure that out.
I just want to restate this. You are not a grifter. You're not someone who's selling access. You're a legitimate businessman who's done deals in a lot of different countries. So I just want you to assess once more, is there anything about Hunter Biden's personal experience, personal qualifications that would justify him doing a deal in Kazakhstan?
Absolutely nothing. The only thing that he had was the Biden family name and the fact that his father at one point obviously was a sitting vice president and potentially would run as a future president.
It sounds like a remarkably ambitious international business program they had running.
Extensive.
He and his uncle.
Extensive.
This is a small point, but I can't get over it. So you saw a number of reporters say, again, in an effort to bat away your story, your testimony on this, that the chairman referred to in a bunch of these emails was not Joe Biden. It was, in fact, the government of China. When you see people refer to the chairman thinks this, the chairman thinks that, they're talking about China and not Joe Biden. So I want to put up on the screen. Here is a text message you received from Hunter Biden to you. Hey, Tony, I have an idea. In light of the fact that we are in an impasse of sorts and both James's lawyers and my chairman gave an emphatic no, I think we should all meet in Romania on Tuesday next week. So you're hearing reporters say that chairman was, in fact, the Chinese government. Here you have Rob Walker responding to you. Clearly there's some confusion over this, and he's saying, and I'm going to put this on the screen now, when Hunter Biden said his chairman, he was talking about his dad.
Correct. There's two chairmen in the story. There's Chairman Yi, who was the chairman of CEFC.
Yes.
In that text from Hunter Biden, he was not talking about the chairman of CEFC. And what Hunter's referencing there is he spoke with his father, and his father is giving an emphatic no to the ask that I had, which was putting proper governance in place around Oneida Holdings.
So Joe Biden is vetoing your plan for putting stricter governance in the company. I mean, and it's right here in the emails.
Yeah, Tucker, I want to be very careful in front of the American people. That is not me writing that. That is not me claiming that. That is Hunter Biden writing on his own phone, typing in that I spoke with my chairman, referencing his father. If the world thinks that my chairman is not his father, then Hunter Biden would come forward and go on record and state to the world.
But you have the Biden family representatives, Rob Walker, saying right here, May 19th, no. When he said his chairman, he was talking about his dad.
Exactly.
They always accuse you of the very things they're doing themselves. If there's one rule you can keep on your fridge, write it down, put it in your wallet, to evaluate the behavior of the people in charge, it's that. They blame you for their sins every single time. The latest example arrived this week when we learned that Joe Biden, fresh from lecturing us about how Donald Trump is a criminal because he had unauthorized possession of secret documents, that very same Joe Biden himself had unauthorized possession of secret documents. But don't worry, it's not a big deal. Unlike you and that despicably orange Donald Trump, Joe Biden is a good person. Joe Biden is so virtuous he has transcended temporal law. It's not a crime when he does it. So that's the frustratingly familiar headline from this week's story, which you've probably seen by now. But the details of the story are actually pretty interesting. So a week before these last midterm elections, Joe Biden's lawyers were for some reason rooting around in a locked closet in the Washington office of something called the Penn Biden Center for Diplomacy and Global Engagement. And while in that locked closet, Biden's lawyers found a sheaf of highly classified government documents. So the first question here is, why were Joe Biden's lawyers doing this in the first place? And we can't say for sure because they haven't told us, but it is weird. Lawyers don't typically search locked closets. Yours probably don't. But Biden's lawyers did. And we'd guess they did because they understood that Republicans were about to win back the House, and with it, congressional subpoena power. So they were likely conducting a cleanup operation preemptively, trying to get ahead of a scandal they knew was coming. And of course, they hid what they found in that closet until after the midterm elections because there's no reason to influence voters too much with information. So there's that. And then there's the question of the so-called Penn Biden Center at the University of Pennsylvania. What is that exactly? The whole idea of an academic Biden Center is pretty funny. Joe Biden is a moron. He's always been a moron, even before the dementia. For decades in Washington, ask anyone who lived there, Biden was famous as the dumbest member of the Senate. People made jokes about it. So why would an Ivy League university name a think tank after a man who can't think and then pay him nearly $1 million a year for not doing anything? Good question. We'll have more on that in just a minute. But first, a word about classified documents. Now, this is not a partisan point, not attacking anybody, it's just the truth. These people you see on television huffing and puffing about vital state secrets, on both sides, by the way, not just Democrats, everybody, vital state secrets, they're either lying or they don't really understand how Washington works. How many legitimate vital state secrets are there? Well, actually, not very many at all. In a democracy, the government has no right to hide what it's doing from the public, except under extraordinary circumstances. It's fine to classify the Normandy invasion until it happens. It is not fine to spend 60 years hiding the fact that the CIA was involved in the murder of a president. Hiding your involvement in the Kennedy assassination is not a national security precaution. It is criminal behavior. And it's made possible by a classification regime that was designed not to protect this country, but to protect and enrich our permanent political class, which it very efficiently does. Oh, but our enemies, screeched the morons on TV. If we declassify these documents, whatever they are, if we do that, our enemies will learn our secrets. Please. China already knows our secrets, all of our secrets. The Chinese government has hacked every agency in Washington, and everybody knows that, and nobody seems to care. The Biden administration cares so little, in fact, it just suspended a counter-espionage program designed to stop Chinese spying. In other words, the Chinese can know, but you can't know. Biden trusts Beijing more than he trusts you. So the media's job, its only job, really, is to push back against attitudes like that and to seek the truth. Reporters are the people who are paid, who for a living find out what your government is doing and then tell you about it, so democracy can continue. But there are very few of those left. Julian Assange is in prison for his efforts. Ed Snowden lives in exile. And the news organizations that remain are so thoroughly controlled by government agencies that even the suggestion of more public transparency drives them to hysteria. Watch CNN and MSNBC, for example, react to the news that Republicans in Congress might tell us some of what the thoroughly corrupt intel community has been doing in our name.
A House committee where Republicans can shred at the integrity of the federal government and tell America that your government is spying on you and coming after you, that is at the heart of this tear down, break down the government. We can't trust the government. We're going to topple it. He just gave them a committee platform to have those hearings. And you better believe that is going to be heroin in the veins of Fox News viewers over the next 2 years.
Basically, they're establishing a subcommittee or a committee on witch hunts and deep state conspiracy theories.
This is so extraordinarily dangerous. As you said, they're going to actually, these people want to target America's intel community.
This is a body that, of the Congress that we are trying to maintain credibility with, and we are not going to do that by opening up all kinds of suspicions about the institutions in our society.
It's outrageous to tell people the government is spying on them, especially since the government is spying on them. That's confirmed, by the way. That's a fact. They spied on us. But if you want to know what your government is doing, scolds Joe Scarborough, you're, quote, targeting America's intel community. You're unpatriotic. You're a disloyal American if you don't want to be lied to. That's what they're saying out loud on MSNBC tonight. In the past few months, we've learned that for years, Twitter functioned as a mouthpiece for the FBI and the spy agencies. Clearly, the same thing has happened to cable news. And that is a graver threat to our democracy than any group of Trump voters who wandered around the Capitol on January 6th. It's not even close. But back to our story and the hilariously obvious double standard on the question of classified documents. It was just this summer that NBC's hyperventilating House historian Michael Beschloss suggested that Donald Trump deserved the death penalty for keeping classified documents at Mar-a-Lago, fried like the Rosenbergs in the electric chair. Former CIA Director Michael Hayden agreed. Sounds about right, Hayden wrote, because at this point it's totally normal for CIA directors to fantasize about killing American presidents. So just for fun today, we reached out to Michael Beschloss to ask what punishment he thinks Joe Biden deserves for keeping classified documents in his office. Of course, Beschloss didn't respond to us. He was too busy applying pancake makeup in his living room for another MSNBC hit. But to be fair, it wasn't just Michael Beschloss who claimed that Trump was endangering America with those documents. They all said that. Watch.
The seriousness of the potential threat to national security information, I just don't know what to say.
If he was in possession of classified documents, those are by definition potentially harmful to our national security.
We have a president of the United States who has played fast and loose with the national security.
We have a situation where what he was doing was dangerous to our national security.
These are really classified and a really threat to national security.
That really jumps out to me as a national security threat.
This is a national security crisis.
The extreme risk that Trump was willing to take with our national security.
The funniest part was Bernstein, formerly the Washington Post, who literally participated in an FBI operation, not guessing, documented, an FBI operation to drive a sitting duly elected president from office. Carl Bernstein participated in that, and he's lecturing us about how, no, we have to keep the secret things secret. So last night we learned that Joe Biden, someone with no power to declassify anything when he was vice president, stashed classified documents in the closet of his private office at the very same time he was sending the DOJ after Donald Trump for doing the same thing. So how exactly are our news media going to make sense of this? Well, of course, with maximum shamelessness. Today, CNN trotted out a CIA lawyer called Brian Greer to explain that mishandling classified information is no longer a big deal. In fact, honestly, kids, it happens all the time.
Almost any mishandling case could potentially be shoehorned into a criminal investigation. But going back to my prior point, because this type of mishandling happens all the time, and now it's become such a political football with all three last presidential candidates being investigated, I do worry about, while we need to take this all seriously and it needs to be investigated, I do worry about over-criminalizing it. Launching these full investigations that become political footballs is dangerous because it can disincentivize people from serving in the federal government. But we do want to incentivize them again to do the right thing, which is report it when it happens, and not to do the wrong thing, which is to conceal and obstruct, which is what Trump did.
Some of us who've worked in cable news for the past 25 years can affirm it wasn't always the case that every time you flipped on the tube, there was some CIA or NSA or FBI employee telling you what the truth is, because news organizations used to assume that if someone was paid to lie for the government, they probably weren't a reliable oracle on TV. They probably weren't telling the truth to viewers, but now it's the norm. So the CIA lawyer you just saw, Brian Greer, was telling us just a few months ago that Donald Trump, by doing the same thing that Biden did, endangered, quote, national security. The intelligence agencies, Greer said, quote, have no choice but to assume a compromise and take proactive measures to protect our sources and collection capabilities. That was then, like August. Now he's telling you this kind of thing happens all the time. Just calm down, calm down. The rest of the news media has been every bit as brazen. The Washington Post just reported that, quote, the case will likely draw comparisons to Mar-a-Lago, but appears to be quite different. Really, how is it quite different? By the way, every news source is telling us there were 10 documents found. How do they know that? Well, of course, they don't know that. They have no idea how many documents were found. They're just taking Biden's lawyer's word for it. That's not news collection. That's press release writing. But you will see identical articles in Forbes and Business Insider and The Hill, the usual places, all repeating the same scripted talking point. Now, in one sense, what those outlets are telling you is true. Joe Biden, we learned today, was not holding on to the kind of cocktail napkins found at Mar-a-Lago. He had actual classified information about a bunch of countries, including Ukraine, from his time as vice president. Why? Why is it always about Ukraine? What is going on in Ukraine? Don't talk about the biolabs. What is that? Why the obsession with Ukraine going back long before the Russian invasion of Ukraine, going back many years? Well, in this case, it turns out that 3 days before Joe Biden left his job as vice president in January of 2017, the Ukrainians were also a little bit confused about the focus on their country. In mid-January 2017, State Department officials circulated a report from Ukrinform, that's the Ukraine state media organization, and the report said this, and we're quoting, literally on the last days of his term, the U.S. Vice President Joe Biden is going to Kiev. How can we explain this attention to us? So even the Ukrainians were confused. Why is the President of the United States, the world's richest country, spending so much of his life focused on Europe's poorest country, Ukraine? What's going on? Well, here's one explanation. At the same moment that Joe Biden was visiting Ukraine as his last official act, his drug-addicted son, Hunter, was still making tens of thousands of dollars a month in a no-show job on the board of Burisma, the largest gas company in Ukraine. Natural gas, something Hunter Biden knew nothing about. Hunter Biden would hold that fake job until 2019. So is there a connection, just guessing here, between the fact that his son was getting rich from Ukraine for a no-show job and Joe Biden's 2017 trip to Ukraine on Air Force Two at your expense? We think there might be a connection, but so far no one in Washington has thought to really press that point because they're still upset about Trump. They're still talking about Trump and his crimes. Watch Joe Biden from this past September explain why he supported the DOJ raid on Mar-a-Lago. And here's a hint, because it's, quote, totally irresponsible for government officials to keep classified documents after leaving office.
When you saw the photograph of the top secret documents laid out on the floor at Mar-a-Lago, what did you think to yourself, looking at that image?
How that could possibly happen. How anyone could be that irresponsible. And I thought, what data was in there that may compromise sources and methods? By that I mean names of people who helped, or et cetera. And it's just totally irresponsible.
So they seem like hypocrites. We could play an endless loop of clips like that for the rest of the hour. You get the point, but they're not actually hypocrites. What they're describing is a caste system where they can do what they want and you are subject to the minutia of their legal code. It's called anarcho-tyranny. But on to more enduring questions, because we know that already. What is this Penn Biden Center? The Penn Biden Center. What's the purpose of the Penn Biden Center? Well, in April of 2016, one of Hunter Biden's business associates explained the purpose in an email to Hunter. He said that the Penn Biden Center, quote, operates like the Clinton Global Initiative without the money raise. Oh, so all the upside, none of the downside. Without the money raise, really? so you don't have to fly around the world raising money. But as the Washington Free Beacon has reported, actually there was a lot of money being raised, and it was being raised by the University of Pennsylvania, and it was being raised from foreign governments after the Biden Center opened. See the connection here? And we're quoting from the piece. Foreign contributions to the University of Pennsylvania tripled since the Penn Biden Center's soft opening in March of 2017, rising from $31 million in 2016 to over $100 million in 2019. Now, where'd all that money come from? Where do you think? The largest foreign contributor was China. And if you go to the webpage for the Penn Biden Center, you get some idea of what that money bought. So on the site, there's a section called, quote, addressing threats to the liberal international order. Russia and Vladimir Putin are mentioned as threats to the liberal international order, but China, which is currently committing genocide, is conspicuously not mentioned as a threat to the liberal international order. So all of this aroused our suspicions naturally, so we decided to take a closer look at the University of Pennsylvania and its ties to China. We took a look at text messages from Hunter Biden's laptop to see if we could find an answer. And we found messages between a senior professor at Penn's International Relations Department to Naomi Biden, that would be Hunter Biden's very young daughter. The message from the professor begins this way, quote, Dear Naomi, I'm writing you tonight to invite you to take part in a major conference in China at the end of March. I've been asked to help recruit a prominent young leader. They, the Chinese government, will fly you business class and, of course, provide all of your accommodations. I don't think it would surprise you that they are interested in you thanks to your family name. I would not take offense at that. It is truly the Chinese way. And frankly, better you than that dolt, Tiffany Trump. If you are interested, can you send me your CV and or a bio? I would forward that, and you could expect an official invitation from Li Baodong, the Secretary General of the Forum. End quote. Pretty remarkable. As far as we know, that has not been previously reported. So here you have an employee of the University of Pennsylvania, an Ivy League school, sending an invitation apparently on behalf of the Chinese Communist Party to recruit Joe Biden's granddaughter for an influence operation, saying that she'd be flown to Beijing and stay in Chinese government-controlled accommodations. So a lot of people on television seem very concerned about national security at the moment. All these former CIA and NSA and FBI employees are going on CNN and MSNBC to tell you national security implications are first in mind. Are they concerned about this? Will they ask a single question about it? If you're an American, you probably assume there's only one kind of democracy, the kind that you grew up with. That would be the democracy where citizens govern themselves through elected representatives chosen in free and fair elections by secret ballot. In that kind of democracy, you get to elect anyone you want because it's your government. The country belongs to you, its citizens. That's traditional American democracy. It exists to serve you. But that's not the only kind of democracy. There's also the Soviet version of democracy. Same word, but very different definition. The Bolsheviks took power in Russia in 1917 by promising a lot more democracy. The country they created, the Soviet Union, became the most oppressive police state in history. Yet it was, you should know, a democracy. That's what they called it. East Germany was a democracy too. So was North Vietnam. So was Ethiopia under Mengistu. So was Albania under the madman Enver Hoxha. Democracies all. In his very first speech as leader of North Korea in 1946, Kim Il-sung described the total destruction of any opposition to his rule, the killing of his political opponents, as, quote, democratic reforms. Almost 80 years later, his grandson, Kim Jong-un, continues to run North Korea as a democracy, a Soviet-style democracy. So again, they're using a very different definition of the word. In their version of democracy, all decisions are made by a shadowy oligarchy, usually fronted by a strongman. Elections still take place, but the point isn't to find out what the population thinks or wants. The point is to lend an aura of legitimacy to the criminals already in charge. Here's Joseph Stalin himself bragging about the results of the 1937 Soviet election, in which his party won roughly 99.4% support, 89 million votes to 562,000 votes for the other guys, whoever they were.
Никогда в мире еще не бывало таких свободных, действительно свободных и действительно демократических выборов. Никогда. История не знает другого такого примера.
Our elections, Stalin went on to say, are the only really free and really democratic elections in the whole world. At the moment Stalin spoke those words, he was busy murdering more than 1 million of his own citizens for political crimes in what became known as the Great Purge. Across the ocean here in the U.S., it was clear even at the time what was happening in the Soviet Union. Some of Stalin's show trials were public, and they were obviously totalitarian. But the American left supported Stalin anyway. That includes some of our country's most famous intellectuals and celebrities and journalists. The New York Times was all in. This turned out to be the version of democracy they supported, Stalin's version. Why are we telling you all this? Well, because you're hearing a lot about democracy lately, so it's important to understand which version they're talking about. Joe Biden gave a speech about democracy last night. Here's part of what he said.
There's something else at stake. Democracy itself. I'm not the only one who sees it. We must vote knowing what's at stake and not just the policy of the moment, but institutions that have held us together as we've sought a more perfect union are also at stake. We must vote knowing who we have been, what we're at risk of becoming. This is a struggle we're now in, a struggle for democracy, a struggle for decency and dignity, a struggle for prosperity and progress, a struggle for the very soul of America itself. Make no mistake, democracy is on the ballot for all of us.
Democracy is on the ballot, says Joe Biden. No, Joe Biden, the names of candidates are on the ballot. Democracy is not on the ballot because democracy is not determined by the outcome of an election. Democracy is the election itself. Democracy is the process by which citizens choose how they will be governed according to their own desires. That's their choice. It's not yours. But Joe Biden is telling you the opposite, and you should know that. He's telling you that unless you arrive at a very specific outcome, the very outcome he commands you to arrive at, the system itself is illegitimate. We control the system. We have a moral right to control the system. Therefore, if we lose control of the system itself can no longer exist. This is a dramatic misreading of what American democracy is. In American democracy, the people who control the system only have a right to control that system to the extent the public grants them that right through voting. What Biden is describing is the Soviet version of democracy, where elections exist to ratify the status quo, to bolster the cabal already in power. That's effectively what the Democratic Party is saying out loud now. Here's Barack Obama.
I understand that democracy might not seem like a top priority right now, but we have seen throughout history, and we see right now around the world, what happens when you give up on democracy. You can see it in countries where the government tells you what books you can and cannot read. Countries where if you dissent, you get put into jail. Countries where reporters are silenced.
Oh, he's slick. But it's hard to believe he really means that. Quote, I understand that democracy might not seem like a top priority right now, said Barack Obama. Really? The opposite is so obviously true. Democracy is very much a top priority for so many Americans this November. And that's why you're seeing record turnout in these midterm elections. Because voters are using the only power they have, their ballots in our democracy, to punish their reckless and incompetent leaders and replace them with somebody else. So what you are seeing unmistakably is democracy in action. That would be very obvious to anyone who believes that democracy means representation. But to those who believe that democracy means supporting the Democratic Party no matter what it does, to those people, this moment has a very different feel. This moment feels like an emergency. A rejection of Joe Biden's party from their perspective is the end of the system itself, and they clearly believe that. They mean it. That's why the Biden administration has spent the last 2 years destroying the two prerequisites for American democracy. Those would be free speech and the rule of law. It's why they've silenced disobedient reporters. It's why they put their political opponents in jail. It's why FBI agents with automatic rifles dragged Christians from their homes for the crime of praying in abortion clinics. It's why nonviolent protesters remain in jail tonight for daring to walk into what used to be called the People's House. Because as far as the Democratic Party is concerned, that house no longer belongs to the people. It belongs to the party, along with the entire U.S. government and the nation itself. That's how they think. If you really believed that you had a moral right to govern forever, and they really do believe that, you would see elections very differently. You wouldn't view the loss of a midterm cycle as the usual healthy rebalancing of American politics, too far in one direction, swing back toward the other side, the kind of thing that has happened countless times in our, yes, democracy. That's what's supposed to happen. But you wouldn't see that. You'd see the loss of your own political power as the loss of everything, as the total destruction of the system itself, the beginning of the Dark Ages. If you believe that, you might be hysterical. And they are. Watch.
Democracy is at stake in this election, Nevada.
He made it clear that democracy is at stake this November.
Democracy is at stake this November. Democracy is at stake.
Our democracy is at stake.
The future of our democracy is at stake.
We all know democracy is at stake.
This is the most important election coming up because democracy is at stake.
Nothing less than the future of democracy is at stake.
Really? It's nonsensical to Americans, most of them, because isn't this democracy? Dissatisfied with one thing, we're choosing another? Isn't that our most basic right? No, not according to the people you just saw. And keep in mind, those weren't just talking points you heard. The people mouthing those words believe them sincerely, every one of them, and they're emotional about it. Because if the Democratic Party goes, so do they. The party is the only power they have. Once that party has been rejected, they will be nothing but what they already are. Sad middle-aged mediocrities with tragic personal lives and nothing interesting to say. So everything is on the line for them. They can't lose. And because they can't lose, they're now getting explicit about what if. Here's Ron Klain, Joe Biden's all-powerful chief of staff, issuing an explicit threat to anyone who might be thinking of voting the wrong way next Tuesday.
The president decided a few days ago that it was important to issue one final warning on this issue, to make very clear, to leave no doubt, that we have people out there still peddling the big lie, people now raising the issue of election denial in this election.
One final warning? One final warning? Really? Who do you think you're talking to, Ron Klain? Illiterate villagers? We're Americans. We are free people. You don't get to warn us of anything, much less for the last time. This is your final warning. Yeah, don't think so. You don't get to say that, Ron Klain. You don't get to say anything like that ever. Because this is a democracy, an American democracy, not a Soviet democracy. In our system, you don't get to issue orders to the rest of us on the eve of an election. No, you beg for our consent because our consent is the only legitimacy you have. This is our government. It's not yours. You are the servant. We are the boss. Act like it.
Food supplies have been completely wiped out. We have our evacuation of all counties. I report complete devastation. We have a giant squall, cloud, just gobbling up everything in their path. Total loss of life.
There are forces in this world that remind us of how fragile we are. We thought we were safe. We thought it could never happen to us. Then life like a fog descends upon us, blanketing our memories. Through the haze, we travel its hidden paths, lost in its secret places. And when the storm, turbulent and immovable, forces us to shelter, we remember. It calls to us. Calls us back to the ports and the harbors of our past. We fight the currents that pull and drag us off course, not a light or star to chart the way. And when we arrive, we don't always know it at first, the places we once loved guised by time. Then we see it, the place we've been trying to get back to. Safe at last, we've found our way home.
Time to check in with our lizard overlords in Davos, Switzerland. What are they up to? Well, this. Thank you for watching. Ooh. Yeah, those people run the world. They're so impressive. What a bunch of freaks.